I was recently asked to share all the techniques a business analyst might use. There are 50 listed in the business analysis body of knowledge, which is a lot for one video, so I'm splitting it into two. I'll do my best to make this as painless as possible, but remember, you asked for this. I'll go through them in alphabetical order since that's how they're listed in the business analysis body of knowledge. The goal is to simply lay out everything that's possible and why you might use them, so I'm only going to scratch the surface with each technique. So if it seems useful to you in your situation, ask questions or find additional resources about it specifically. I'll also include a table of contents in the description if you want to jump to something specific. Okay, here we go. Kicking it off with 10.1 acceptance and/or evaluation criteria. These are really just requirements that must be met in order to give a solution, feature, or a requirement a pass or a fail. The difference between the two is that acceptance criteria is typically used for something under development, like a user story in a sprint, and evaluation criteria are more common when you're comparing features of like different software that you're potentially acquiring. You should expect to do this a lot as a BA. 10.2 Backlog Management is basically how your Scrum team manages your backlog in terms of definition of ready and definition of done and so forth. I would definitely look into researching Scrum backlog best practices for more on this one. Balanced Scorecard is a technique intended to gauge the health of your organization. It involves measuring 4 categories: customer satisfaction, employee growth, business process efficiency, and financials. I honestly can't imagine an entry-level business analyst being asked to do this because it might include some tough conversations with high-level people. In fact, to be truly unbiased, I could see a consulting agency doing this for a company. 10.4 Benchmarking and market analysis is simply a way of comparing how you are doing to industry standards. The important thing here is to make sure you're comparing the right measures, but otherwise, conceptually, it's pretty straightforward. If every competitor does A, B, and C, you measure how well you are doing A, B, and C. 10.5 Brainstorming is an umbrella term for coming up with ideas. You can brainstorm alone, or you can facilitate brainstorming with a group. It involves good preparation within the context areas and having the right people involved. It involves creating an environment for all people to share and explore freely and without judgment. And finally, it involves outputting everything that was collected in a valuable way. 10.6 Business Capabilities Analysis is similar to benchmarking in that you are essentially comparing to a standard of some kind. This is another thing I'd expect to happen with an experienced business analyst and likely from a consulting company. Oftentimes, it's depicted as a bunch of boxes which are organized by category and color-coded for like a pass-fail or maybe some nuance in between. 10.7 Business case is basically something you write to justify spending time, resources, and money for a project to change something or buy something. It would likely include items from the Balanced Scorecard and how it'll improve them. 10.8 Business Model Canvas is just a standard way of essentially show what your organization does and how it produces value. It's very reminiscent of what enterprise architects do, which is a common career path for business analysis. 10.9 Business Rules Analysis basically documents the policies in which a business operates and helps inform how to formulate a business process. For example, a business rule might be that you don't sell to people under 18. That might mean that the business process needs to have a step to validate age and pass for passing or failing age verification. 10.10 Collaborative games are basically activities to help groups of people essentially create focus and direction for what the group needs to accomplish. In my own experience, I've used affinity mapping many times since it's easy for people to understand and participate. It also gets people up and moving around. 10.11 Concept mapping at a high level is just taking a bunch of terms or concepts from your domain and modeling out how they all relate to each other. I find them fun to make and extremely useful in understanding a new domain or helping others understand a domain. It is what I recommend a BA do when they first start a new project. 10.12 Data Dictionary is basically a glossary for all your data. It often uses slightly more complex organization structures than, say, a dictionary. For example, you might define a person as a thing in your system and then define a child as a subcategory of person defined by an age range, then adult, and you get the idea. It facilitates clarity. 10.13 Data flow diagrams are pretty key business analyst diagrams. They basically illustrate applications and what data flows between them. It helps create a sort of context in understanding what teams need to be worked with when something is going to change. 10.14 Data mining comes in 2 forms: looking at data to find an answer to a question, or looking at data with no question to answer just to see what it tells you. Data helps inform a lot of decisions, so you should be comfortable doing some degree of data analysis to better perform your job as a business analyst. 10.15, data modeling is a way to document how data is organized, typically using standard notations. It's often used to model how database structures will be actually organized. There's value in understanding data modeling to better understand and communicate constraints or opportunities in decision making related to data. 10.16, decision analysis is about organizing information to make it easier to make a decision. There are different ways to accomplish this, but a common method is a scorecard with all the variables listed, values assigned and weighted, and seeing how different choices stack up side by side. 10.17, decision modeling is more focused on visualizing how decisions are made and the outcomes. The decision model would theoretically be a big cascade of business rules. 10.18 is literally learning from looking at existing documentation. Could be manuals, help documents, documents created by previous business analysts, and more. It typically helps you build a degree of understanding so you can make the best of your time when in meetings and such. 10.19, estimation for a business analyst is another big umbrella category of many techniques to estimate the future value of something. Most organizations have standards for how they prefer to estimate things, but if it's something that impacts your work a lot, it could be valuable to explore different methods of estimation. 10.20, financial analysis revolves around assessing the benefit to the bottom line or revenue, usually over time, and is one reason business analysts, new hires, are business majors focused in IT because they would have had to take some finance and accounting classes. The more senior you become, the more likely you'll have to deal with more and more financial aspects of projects. 10.21, focus groups are typically used to basically ask a group of people how they feel about something. For example, an HR business analyst working on a project for new hire onboarding might have a focus group with a bunch of new hires to ask them how they felt about their onboarding experience. 10.22, functional decomposition is basically breaking down a high-level thing into its lower-level parts. This might mean breaking down a business requirement into functional requirements for each part of the system that needs to change, or epics or features down into user stories. You'll be doing this a lot as a business analyst. It's kind of your main thing. 10.23 is a glossary. Basically, if you have a bunch of nuanced terms or acronyms in your domain, keeping a glossary will help you and anybody else that's new to your domain. 10.24, interface analysis for business analysis is looking at any interface, whether it's a data interface, user interface, application interface, and basically documenting what's there and why it exists. This is something very important to understand before making changes into a system. 10.25 is interviews. It's how you learn stuff from people, and I really hope you already knew that. The only thing I'll say here is to make sure that you have a goal for the interview before conducting it to help focus the conversation. Well, you made it through the first 25. If you actually made it this far, let me know in the comments that you completed the first 25, because I'm quite proud of you, and you probably deserve a cookie or a beer or a nap or whatever it is that you like to reward yourself with. As always, if you have questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll answer you there or create a new video like this one. So subscribe to see those questions get answered, and keep a lookout for part 2.